It's now my pleasure to welcome a friend of mine to the truth, Mallory Staples. She was a candidate for Congress in Georgia's 6th. She made a great impression on many, many people, and she's not done yet. She now works for the Freedom Caucus. That's the organization that Mark Meadows and Jim DeMint started to bring conservative values to Congress, and they have also formed state organizations like the Georgia Freedom Caucus. And Mallory, if I'm not mistaken, you are its director, correct?
I am. Yes. Proud to say.
So I really am looking forward to speaking with you this morning and appreciate you joining us. I do want to mention that you just lost your mom, and I want to express my condolences to you, and also tell you how much we appreciate your coming on to speak with us under these very difficult circumstances. So thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you, John. I appreciate that.
So tell us about the Georgia Freedom Caucus and what you're up to. Are we making headway? Well, before I ask you that, I want to ask you about Mark Meadows. I really applaud the work that he's done. I know Mark. He's, I think, a great guy. He's from Highlands, North Carolina, just up the road from us. I was really surprised that he didn't have a role in Trump 47's administration. Do you have any insight into that?
I know. That is surprising. I mean, I know he is entrenched in CPI, which is another institution that he started along with the Freedom Caucus.
Conservative Partnership Institute.
Yes, very involved there and very involved with the House Freedom Caucus up in D.C. to actually share offices up there. So I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but I think, when it comes to his record, Mark has certainly proven that he is loyal, which I know is a very big deal to President Trump, and equipped. I mean, he's qualified. So I don't know if there'll be, throughout the next 4 years, something that comes up with him, but I think he's an amazing fit still to, lead the team Trump. So I do think that's unusual, and can only, maybe guess it's the timing wasn't great for him, but I don't know for sure. We will be able to speak with him soon. He's coming to Atlanta next week to help us out here on the fight for freedom in Georgia, which is ongoing, and just incredible what the state of Georgia actually is when it comes to conservatives. But we'll be with him next week at an event we have here, so we're excited to host him.
So give us a little 30,000-foot view of the Georgia legislature and the dynamics there. The Senate has how many members? Is it 56 or 60?
Mm-hmm.
56 is the number?
Mm-hmm.
And what's the split, Democrat and Republican?
Republicans hold the majority. I believe it's 34. 34, I think. Mm-hmm.
All right. And then within the Republican ranks, you've got conservative Republicans, and then you've got rhino Republicans. Do you have a sense for what the balance is there?
Yeah, it's really out of balance, actually. And one of the things we like to do as the Freedom Caucus is we bring the receipts. So we try not to be overly political, overly emotional, but just look at the voting records. That's the metric we use to determine if somebody's a rhino or not. We don't look at association, conversation, that kind of thing. We look at whether they hit that red button or whether they hit that green button. And so we have 4 metrics that we use when we look at legislation, and we really are the premier legislative watchdogs here in Georgia. We have a dedicated legislative director who reads every single bill and resolution that is put forward, which last biennium, there were over 5,000 bills and almost 1,800 resolutions. So it's a very heavy lift. It takes a full-time employee to do that. Most of the members of the General Assembly do not read all the bills. I would say from their own words, they really don't read most of them. They do whatever leadership tells them to do in their caucus meetings in the morning. And when you question them about bills, a lot of times they don't even know what's in them.
Well, and if you do question them about what's in them, you get ostracized and put on an island, much like Colton Moore has
yes.
been banished and is persona non grata and kicked out of the Republican caucus, which I just find shameful and apocryphal, frankly, that they would treat somebody like that, who really has tried to stand up for the truth and be honest about his decision making.
Yes. And ethical. Colton has a code, and he sticks to that. And again, personalities and party, it doesn't matter. He's going to do the right thing based on what he told his constituents that he would do. And we just do not have many leaders like that. Like, our metric is if a bill grows the size of government, if it raises taxes, if it increases regulation or infringes on personal freedom, we're a no. And that used to be the foundations of the Republican Party. But now the Republicans are the big spenders. They're the ones that are growing government at a size that is unbelievable. We've seen that most recently with both the supplemental budget and the baby budget, as they call it, and the big budget. Those are the Republicans. And when we stand up and fight in the Freedom Caucus against bills, I can tell you right now, 99% of the time, they're carried by Republicans. We rarely fight the Democrats. It's the Republicans that are carrying bills that fly in the face of those four pillars I just mentioned. And we are told ad nauseum by leadership here in the state of Georgia how conservative and how red Georgia is, and it's the best place to do business. Well, it is not. I mean, it is absolutely not. And when you look at bills like digital ID bills and de facto gun registration bills and compact psychological licensing bills that put us in with liberal states like New Jersey and Colorado to govern the citizens of Georgia, those are all carried by Republicans. So it's just, we need a real wake-up call here in Georgia for what they're doing with our money and for the overall posture of the legislature that is Republican. And it does infringe on liberties on the regular.
It's so disappointing to me. And you've got people like Brad Raffensperger, who I'm told by multiple sources was one, if not the most conservative member of the Georgia House of Representatives. And then he becomes elected as a constitutional officer, the Secretary of State. And I'm sorry, Mr. Raffensperger, but you do not tell the truth. And I have caught you in a half a dozen lies, and that's personally offensive to me. What happens to people? They come in, they've got the right values, they've got the right principles, and the next thing you know, they're co-opted and doing horrible things. They're not governing for us. What the hell is going on, Mallory?
Lobbyists. I mean, I think the long and the short of that is the lobbyists. So what happens is they do come in doe-eyed with ideals, good men, good women, wanting to do right for the most part. You have some people that run just because they want to be famous and have power. But ultimately, our government is run by the Chamber of Commerce. And so, and big lobbies like the hospital lobby, the pharmaceutical lobby, the chemical lobby, the electric motor vehicle lobby, these kind of things, the film industry, food and beverage, you name it, there's a lobbyist there. And they sit on these people and they treat them well. They sometimes pay for their apartments where they stay during session. They pay for their dinners. And over time, they just acquiesce. They bow their knee. Those groups certainly own leadership for the most part, and they are brought in. We have a freshman member of the Freedom Caucus who has, this year, who we have watched with fresh eyes, openly be threatened on the floor of the General Assembly in front of God and everyone, and they don't care. A leadership comes to them and tells them in the morning, this is how you will vote on these bills, and if you do not, you will not get blah, blah, blah. This is the end of your career. I mean, we saw Governor Kemp with tort reform bill, SB 68, openly threatened. I mean, it was kind of like DEFCON 5. The bill was not getting tons of interest. We were like, there's some good parts, there's some bad parts. It wasn't like a big red flag. And then the governor stood up and threatened to primary anyone who not just voted against his bill, but had the audacity to amend it. He was like, no changes, end of story. And if not, we will come after you. That is really the mafia style tactic that takes place. And I'll be honest with you, John, very few men or women have the intestinal fortitude and the steel spine to stand up like Noel Cahan has done in the House side and say, go for it. Go for it. And I will tell everyone what you've done to me, but I have an obligation to my constituents. And so they get threatened. I mean, it's incredible. It's incredible. And our chairman, Charlie Spurd, on the House side, has put up with this type of abuse for years. Colton, Senator Moore, as you mentioned, our vice chairman, he stood up and said, hey, I think we need a special session to investigate Fani Willis when she came after President Trump and the other indictees. I mean, pretty simple concept, which history has now proven him absolutely right, that there was a problem there. And our governor, I mean, I want people to understand, every member of our executive branch, every officer, and both majorities in the chambers are Republicans. And we could not, our governor would not call for a special session. He has still to this day remained silent over Fani Willis and Nathan Wade to this day.
It's bizarre. And I get the impression, I get the sense that Kemp has a stranglehold on both houses of the legislature, yes, certainly more in the House than in the Senate. And is John Burns his puppet?
Absolutely. I would actually dare to say that John Burns is probably more liberal than the governor even. John Burns is not even a Republican. In my opinion, when you look at his record, he is not even a Republican. I don't know how he can run as a Republican. I'd like to see him not be able to do that should he run again. And there's efforts to do that. But he is not even a Republican.
So how does Burt Jones survive in this swampy gold dome that we're living under?
Yeah, I mean, it's impressive. And, I'm a supporter of Burt Jones, but I'll be honest to say it's a mixed bag with Burt. Sometimes we don't get the support we need because the pressure that he's getting from the other side, the establishment, is so intense, and he has to, or chooses to, to get some of his initiatives through, bend a little. But he was outspoken, which we appreciated, about what happened to Colton, the assault and arrest of a sitting duly elected senator in the state of Georgia being
it was
pushed to the
worst
ground.
Display I have ever seen anywhere in any state legislature that I've followed. I just
same here. I've had congressmen call me from other states and say, that is the worst video I have ever seen. And normally I get desensitized to things after you see them, but every time I watch that video, it gets worse.
I totally agree with you. And we had Senator Moore on our show the very next day, and he was transparent, he was candid, and I really appreciated him coming on. But the people of Georgia have got to have his back, and have got to have the backs of your Freedom Caucus, because you people are trying to bring reforms and change, and it's awfully difficult, isn't it? Especially when you consider the fact that I believe the number is somewhere close to 100 million that Kemp has got in his little war chest, and God only knows what he's planning on doing with that. But he has got some pretty serious political clout.
He does, and I don't even understand it. It's just a lack of knowledge that his polling is so high as well. But I mean, you look at the governor's budget. We have a $36 billion surplus. They took in $16 extra billion. None of that will get returned to the people. The Freedom Caucus are the only members of either chamber to put forward legislation to begin to reduce the income tax here in the state of Georgia, that over 6 years we would adjust and get rid of the income tax. And the governor's budget, last year, they passed it seal clapping all the way like it was the greatest thing ever. And it was 0.1%. If we did that every year, it would take 54 years for the state of Georgia to come in line with our neighboring states who don't have any income tax. That is not conservative. And quite honestly, at the rate of spending, our budget is growing disproportionately to inflation. It is disproportional to all our neighboring states. We will never, ever see an elimination of the income tax in the state of Georgia. When we are giving away $13 billion in tax credits, some $900 million to the film industry alone, which are bringing in, that's a Trojan horse for a lot of these social issues that conservatives do not like, the woke agenda, if you will. Mm-hmm. And we're paying them to come do it. And 97% of those tax credits are transferable. So those are going to people that don't even live in the state of Georgia, but it's on the backs of the taxpayers. So that's the kind of financial climate that we have in the state of Georgia. We are paying over $7 or $8 billion million in servicing our bond debt. But yet we have $36 billion in a slush fund surplus. Why are we paying to service debt when we're in the we're flushed with money? I mean, none of it makes sense. Absolutely none of it makes sense, except to say that we are picking winners and losers. We public-private partnership. We are funding certain businesses. We are giving breaks to certain businesses, and we're not doing it for everyone. And again, this is the taxpayer money. The government has no money unless they take it from the people.
Yeah.
And like in the House, they just passed a bill to force the taxpayers to pay for generators for gas stations and nursing homes. I'm sorry, both of those industries are doing quite well. They need to buy their own generators, but yet we continue to vote we, the General Assembly, for welfare. And the people, if they knew and understood what they were doing with their money, they would be outraged. Like, they just gutted the Promise Scholarship, defunded it by 32% in the budget. This is school choice, to send that money to subsidies for things like generators for gas stations. I mean, and these again are the Republicans. We hold Republican majorities in the House. We have a Republican speaker. We hold Republican majority in the Senate. And we have executive officers that are all Republicans in Georgia. So I think the real lie is that Georgia's red.
Yeah.
I think we're more blue than red.
All right, so let's break it down. In the Senate, you've got 34 Republican senators. How many of them are what you would consider to be true Republicans based on your 4 pillars?
So we've had a couple of senators step up. I mean, after Colton, and there's a wide berth there's a very big margin when you look at the voting records. Your next most conservative senator would be Greg Dolezal, who's actually a founding member of the Freedom Caucus here in Georgia, along with Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones. When Burt was in the Senate, they were both members that started the Freedom Caucus here. Behind them would probably be Senator Anna Vitarte, and surprisingly, Senator Bearden has stepped forward and voted often with Senator Moore, who is, like I said, hands down the most conservative. So, I mean, I think you've got really just a handful, just a couple. The rest, it's a hit or miss as to how they're going to vote.
It sounds like you got a lot of work ahead of you. So what about the House? How's the breakdown in the House?
2. You have 2 truly conservative members of the House, and that is Charlie Spurd and Noel Kahan. They are the only 2 people that just voted against the budget in the House. The only 2. And I just dropped a newsletter on my Substack. It's called Under the Dome, that gives a very granular breakdown of the budget. And I would recommend for all your listeners to make themselves aware of that and the data that is in there. We've made it as easy as possible to understand. And it's basically like, here's the line for inflation and here's the line for spending in Georgia. And we talk about what they've done with that money, but those are the only 2. That's it. In the entire, there's like 100 Republicans in the House, and we have 2 conservatives. The rest vote straight leadership.
Is the Freedom Caucus losing the battle or winning the battle? Where are you in the fight?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'd like to say we're winning because we kill bills. And you want to talk about David versus Goliath, when you look at numbers, we kill bills, and we kill more bills than we push through. Colton just had a great bill that passed out of the Senate, SB 163. That's a 2A protection. It's the first 2A protection bill we've been able to get through. But because there's so much trash that comes through, we're better at killing bills than championing them. But we are a force to be reckoned with, and I give absolute credit to the grassroots. We have coalition partners in every area of interest when it comes to legislation, from medical freedom to election integrity to parental rights, taxes, 2A, pro-life, education. Partner with us all over the state. And when we tap them to call their senators and House reps, they do not play around. They get on the phone and they do it. And so we are quite the force, but it's because of the grassroots, John. It's not because of the legislators. It's because of the people.
So you've got an event coming up in Atlanta next week, if I understand correctly, on the March 18th.
Yes.
Tell us about that. And if people want to help the Georgia Freedom Caucus. It sounds to me like that might be a good place to start.
It would be. It'd be wonderful. Yes, it's going to be on the 18th. It's a lunch. VIP starts at 11. The main event at 11:30, and we have a House Freedom Caucus member flying in, Ralph Norman, who you see all the time up in DC, holding the line at the national level, and then our friend we just mentioned, former Trump Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, is coming in as well to, share with us what's going on, kind of the behind the scenes, to encourage us here in Georgia to lend some visibility and support to our fight here. And we would love to have everyone come who can. That's all over my social media. There's a QR code where you can register. And hey, listen, if you can't come, but you're like, I like what you're saying, I want more members in the General Assembly like Freedom Caucus, there's a button you can just donate and be like, hey, I can't come eat with y'all, but I want to have your back and push you forward. That would be amazing.
So what is the best website to go to be able to reserve tickets for Tuesday's event or to donate?
It would be to tap my social media. So I'm on X, Instagram, and Facebook, Mallory Staples, and go on there. That flyer with the QR codes all over, and it takes you right to the landing page. Also, I have that Substack. I don't know if y'all are, savvy with Substack, but that's where I put the newsletter out on all the legislation, and you can support the Freedom Caucus there too. So whatever your platform is, we're on it, and there's a link.
So I was just on an interview with Dr. Jerome Corsi, who is a very conservative and pretty hardliner. And I enjoyed our conversation a lot. And in just a few moments that we've got left, Mallory, what's your scorecard on the Trump administration now, 45 days in?
Well, I think the confirmation of the cabinet has been impressive, and if I'm not mistaken, historical, to have that done in a record, 45 days. So I'd love to see that. The pulse for the grassroots is we want to see the DOJ lock in at the speed of Doge. They've got those algorithms, and it is unbelievable what they are uncovering. And we are very anxious to see the DOJ get involved in trials, like prosecuting these people. I want to see that happen, not just investigations and things like that.
So heads need to roll, where
yes.
not for retribution, but for accountability. So
yes.
The new head of the Department of Education just this week has laid off half the staff at the Department of Education, and they've closed the doors temporarily. So that responsibility is going to fall back onto the states. Now, I don't know the makeup of the Georgia Department of Education today. I know that some years ago, when I was up to speed on it, we had put two of the superintendents of the Georgia Department of Education in prison for graft and corruption. I don't know what it's like today. Is the state of Georgia better equipped to manage the educational system in Georgia than the federal Department of Education?
Well, theoretically they are. Everything needs to be pushed back down to the state level. That was our founding fathers' plan. The federal government operates well outside of its constitutional jurisdiction. So that absolutely, yes. However, it is going to be, I think it will get worse for a minute before it gets better, because we are so entrenched with corruption and people that just ideologically do not align with the citizenry and have these rogue random agendas. And I think the education arena is just drenched in that. And so what it's going to require is for the people to get involved. Yeah, folks who are watching and saying this is outrageous need to run for their school boards. They need to start, even if they don't do that, John, show up at the meetings. We are supposed to be a citizen-run government, and we haven't been for a long time, and that's how we got here. That's how this stuff is allowed to happen, whether it's the spending or the ideological hijacking of what our country stands for. It's because the people haven't participated. So it 100%. Will require that people get involved and give up their free time to protect their country and their state.
So real quick, two quick questions. One, Pam Bondi, Cash Patel, your assessment.
So I was a little bit disappointed when Matt Gaetz stepped out, because I do think he, just from the fact that he doesn't take PAC money, I think he's the only member of Congress that didn't take PAC money. I was very excited for him. And then he stepped out and Pam stepped in, and I heard a mixed bag on her. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I'll just pause that and wait and see. And so as I've said before, I'm excited about her. I would like to see some action taken immediately. I think there's so much low-hanging fruit for just treason alone, with people that have been governing for the past 4 years, whether it's in the military or across every arm of the government. So I want to see her step on it, as I said, Doge style. And then I'm a big Cash Patel fan, big fan. I know he has been there like the least amount of time actively, but I would love to see everybody hit the gas pedal. So I'm a fan of Cash's. I was very hopeful, but not as familiar with Pam Bondi and her background. I kind of heard both sides on that. So I'd love her to prove herself to be as MAGA as we're hoping she is in short order.
Well, I've just got to say that as much as I supported their nominations and I was cheering for them, I share your sentiment about Matt Gaetz, who I know and think that he's a really good, honest truth broker. But I have to say, I am disappointed and I am concerned about the lack of results now, a month and a half into the new administration, with respect to the JFK, RFK, MLK, and Epstein files. We were promised on day one they would be released. And then Pam Bondi says, oh, they only sent me 200 pages, and there's another trove of documents that they've shipped out by the deadline. But let me tell you something. Those documents, I mean, they're not in paper form. She's got the highest security clearance she can have. All she has to do is log on to the FBI website and go to the files and look at them. And if she wants it in paper, print them out herself. But that's a bunch of BS that they didn't deliver the documents there. I guarantee you they are online and that she has access to them.
Yeah.
So that makes me wary. And the fact that nothing has happened of substance yet really does concern me. And I've been a student of the JFK assassination for the last 60 years. I feel like I've got a lot of insight into who killed Kennedy. Now I'm beginning to wonder whether my hypotheses are correct, because the fact that I think everybody in America that is bothered to look suspects that the CIA killed Kennedy. And the fact that they haven't released the information, which would just confirm what we think we already know, makes me wonder if there's not something more sinister going on. A lot of people feel like Israel may have had a hand in it, and I think that there is suspicion that Epstein may have actually been an agent of Israel rather than our own CIA. Dr. Jerome Corsi told me this morning he thinks he was a triple agent and was working for both security agencies as well as MI6. So I don't know, but it sure is disappointing thus far, and I hope that we get the answers that we were promised by all of these people.
I agree. And quickly, let's go. Let's go.
Trust us. We'll deal with it. We'll handle it. But this government, I think, is rotten to its very core. And I also want to know what happened in Butler, Pennsylvania on July the 13th. Was it Thomas Maxwell Crooks on that AGR building roof, or was it this other guy named Maxwell Urich, which is a topic for another day? But I continue to remind our listeners that I think that Maxwell Urich is the key to what happened in Butler. We need to know. So finally, Mallory, thank you so much once again for coming on. You made a really good name for yourself when you ran for the Georgia 6th Congressional District against Rich McCormick, and you lost the primary to
Jake Evans.
Jake Evans, thank you very much. And but you came out of that race with a very good following and a good reputation. What is next for Mallory Staples?
Well, right now I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. I have had several calls to run for office just because of the state that Georgia's in, and we need grassroots. I mean, quite honestly, the reason I did as well as I did in that race, and that you compliment me the way you have, is because of my grassroots following. It's because of the people, because I'm just one of them, and we need more of us, and it's just that simple. So I have had some calls to run for Congress as well as some statewide offices, and I cannot do it right at this moment. So I will keep exposing what's going on here in Georgia and trying to protect the citizenry from these bills. And we'll see what happens in the next handful of years. I imagine I'll run for something. I'm just going to choose my family right now. I have younger children, and I'm going to choose them for the moment. I know God honors that, and there's certainly work for me to do. But I think probably on the horizon will be another run for something.
And what grade do you give your former opponent, Rich McCormick, for his performance in Congress?
I feel like Rich has, when it comes to fiscal issues, he has voted similarly to what I would vote. Rich and I drastically part ways when it comes to Ukraine and foreign policy. Very, 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 very different. I'd like to think I probably would have gone a little bit harder on the establishment and what's going on up there. I would have for sure been a member of the House Freedom Caucus. So, you know, again, a mixed bag on Rich. You know, we have some similarities, but we also have some differences, which is why
he running
I got
in
in the race.
26 for re-election?
Say that again?
Is he running in 26 for re-election?
I think so. And I don't know that he'll do it, but I think he is in the conversation along with Mike Collins, Marjorie Taylor Greene for that Senate seat. I don't know that he'll run for it, but I've heard his name. Actually, that earlier broadcast I was on this morning, someone mentioned him as well. And Tyler Harper. I mean, I think there's a lot of people it'll depend on what Kemp does.
Well, thank you again, Mallory. I really appreciate your coming on, especially under the current circumstances that you personally are facing. And I wish you well, and we'll keep you in our thoughts and prayers. Again, this Tuesday at the Capital City Club in Atlanta, Brookhaven, you can attend the Georgia Freedom Caucus lunch with Mark Meadows and South Carolina Congressman Ralph Norman, and of course, our very own Mallory Staples. So just go to at Mallory Staples on X and Facebook, and I assume YouTube maybe, or Rumble, all of the social media.
Yeah, I'm not on those platforms unless it's like a media drop, really. It's those three and then Substack. So yeah, Facebook, Instagram, X, and then Substack.
Instagram, that's the one I keep forgetting about because I'm old school and I still am on Facebook. But thank you again. Have a wonderful day, and good luck with your event this next Tuesday in Atlanta.
Thank you, John. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it very much.
Our pleasure.